Welcome back to my 2017 Game of the Year extravaganza. It's day 5 and we're fresh out of awards, meaning it's time for me to finally unveil my 10 favourite games of the year. Before we get to that, however, I've thrown in a few honourable mentions, although 2017 was just so packed with great games that I still haven't been able to fit in everything I enjoyed. Of course, these are all just my own personal opinions, but I'd love to hear what you would have picked in the comments below. Let's get to it. Honourable mentions. Cook, Serve, Delicious 2. As a huge fan of the original Cook, Serve, Delicious, I was eager for more manic meal-making mayhem, and CSD2 didn't disappoint. In fact, although the main career progression was a little less defined in ways that left some players a little dissatisfied, the much more pick-up-and-play format of 2 suited my desires perfectly. I was able to pick from an ever-widening range of different restaurants, each with their own menu items and specialties, and just get my cook on straight off the bat. When it all kicks off, CSD2 feels like a game of StarCraft, but with the zealots and zerglings replaced by delicious burgers and sushi. Raina's ramen. Persona 5. There's an alternate timeline somewhere where I poured 100+ hours into Persona 5 and it was fighting for a place right near the top of my year-end list. However, in this current plane of existence, the reality is that a combination of factors including time limitations, my ever-troublesome choice paralysis, and an unfortunate hard drive failure at an inopportune moment meant I actually only put about 25 hours into Persona 5's story. I am dead set on continuing my journey, and the opening arc has only made me more excited to do so, but it'll have to be one for the future. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. I was incredibly impressed with the way Lost Legacy turned out. I gave Uncharted 4 the benefit of the doubt because it was a nice way for Naughty Dog to get used to developing for the PlayStation 4, but I was beginning to feel the series fatigue. Lost Legacy could have been that final step too far, but instead it jumps onto all the things I think stood out most from 4. The open world sequences, the wider, more freeform combat, smart puzzles, and a couple of the series' most compelling characters. Lost Legacy evolves the formula in interesting ways, and I came away from my time with Nadine and Chloe actually interested for more Uncharted, as long as it leans into its newfound strengths.
Fair point.
Yakuza Kiwami. What a smart decision this was. After finishing Yakuza 0, my first foray into this long-running saga, I was eager to see where Kiryu and Majima would go next. However, those first 2 titles from the PS2 era are dated to say the least. Remaking them in the modern engine was the perfect way to continue my Yakuza adventure. This actually could have been higher on the list, but just about everything good in it is done as well or better by Zero, and in fact, despite the modern take, some of that clunkier PS2 era design and writing still holds it back a little. I'd still absolutely recommend it, but I ended up pushing it out of the top 10 in favour of a little more variety. 2017's Game of the Year. Number 10. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is a revelation. I've never been an ardent Legend of Zelda fan, I've dipped in and out of the series in the past, but it wasn't until 2013's A Link Between Worlds that I truly fell in love. Breath of the Wild couldn't be much more of a departure from that game's traditional structure, yet its openness spoke to me in a similarly compelling fashion. Here, the core promise is freedom. Freedom to go where you want, when you want. Freedom to approach problems in any way your mind can contemplate. Sure, the world will throw obstacles at you, towering cliffs, toxic swamps or frosty mountaintops, but rather than simply finding the item or button to bypass them as decades of Zelda tradition would have you do, Breath of the Wild invites you to experiment and rewards you for ingenuity when most games would simply reject your alternative solutions. Ordinarily, not having clearly defined goals and solutions might put me off. If I don't have something to work towards after all, where do I even start? Thankfully, Breath of the Wild doesn't conflate a lack of direction with a lack of objectives. Whether it was as simple as wanting to earn more stamina, or as specific as tracking down one of the great fairies, I could instantly set a target for myself at any time and be on my way, undoubtedly finding multiple other things to do as I went along. But more than anything else, I found that during my time in Hyrule I was predominantly doing one of 2 things, either simply looking in wonder at the world around me, or asking, I wonder if this would work. And the answer was often yes, and when it wasn't usually because I couldn't do it, but because I lacked specific resources or had misjudged something myself. Breath of the Wild made me feel smart, in a way that few games do, but it also really captured that sense of going on an adventure. Gone are the days of simply saying, you see that mountain? You can go there. Now when I see that mountain, I want to go there. Number 9. The Sexy Brutale. The Sexy Brutale really caught me off guard. I had a grasp on the basic time-rewinding murder prevention concept going in, but I didn't expect the gorgeous isometric art style, nor the gloriously funky soundtrack, nor the fact that it was basically a twist on the point-and-click adventure. The tragic tale of the Sexy Brutale truly ticked all my boxes. By the time I was done with it, I'd scoured every corner, found every secret and collectible, read the stories behind every quest and room on the premises. The mansion itself is a labyrinth which feels just complex enough to get lost in as you learn your way around, but comes together such that navigating it becomes second nature by the latter hours. Yet that only makes it even more satisfying when you pop out from a secret passage behind that painting you walked past 20 times, or finally unlock that door that's been forcing you to take lengthy detours for the past few hours. The core puzzles themselves were exactly the right level of challenge to play to my tastes too, almost all of them giving me a decent period of wandering about, poking and prodding for a lead, but none of them ever stumping me in such a way as to become frustrating. Even once you work out what needs to be done, there's always just enough of a level of execution required to keep things tense, rather than ever feeling like you're simply checking tasks off a list. Number 8. Tekken 7. I've been a fan of Tekken since the original first generation PlayStation days, and while the series has been pretty consistently solid over its more recent entries, I haven't been grabbed quite so hard by any of them as this, since perhaps Tekken 3. I'm not quite sure what changed, perhaps it just fell at the right time when I wasn't particularly invested in any other fighting games, perhaps 7's particular nuances of combat clicked with my brain a little more, perhaps it was the incredible slow motion moments that hit at the end of tight rounds and never stop being the hypest thing imaginable. In all likelihood, it was a mixture of so many elements all clicking perfectly into place, but the result is unquestionable. Tekken 7 is one of the most compelling fighters I've played, and has reignited a fire for the King of Iron Fist tournament in my heart that hasn't truly burned since Street Fighter 4 won me over to the 2D style. Reliving the core Mishima saga and seeing it through to a supposed conclusion was such a delight that even the monotone narrator couldn't diminish it. The roster brings back pretty much all my favourite characters with only a couple of exceptions, and adds in a rather sizable helping of new fighters to the mix, all of whom are pretty good fun to play, even if I wish they'd been given just a little bit more story integration. The training mode isn't the best around, but it offered up just enough to get me to put some serious time into learning a few target combos, and progress from years of just knowing the move lists to actually starting to string things together. The online works smoothly, the customization tools are good fun, if perhaps a little lacking in variety at times, and have you seen that end of round slow-mo effect? It's no surprise it's kicked off as a spectator game either. Tekken is back, and I couldn't be happier about it. Number 7. Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. If you'd asked me when the Switch was announced what I was looking forward to seeing on it most, a Ubisoft crossover strategy game which gleefully hands Mario and Co an armoury of guns as their universe is sent cartwheeling into that of the Rabbids would never even have crossed my mind. Yet Mario and Rabbids not only gave me a real investment into two franchises that have never been amongst my personal favourites, it also delivered one of the most well-designed grid-based strategy games I've ever played. I've always been frustrated by a lot of the random chance elements in the likes of XCOM, both because they can be difficult to predict, and because they often feel pretty unrealistic when your trained soldier has a 72% chance to hit at point blank range. In Mario and Rabbids, I know at a glance exactly what my percentages are, and I know that if I get a clean shot off that I can rely on that hit landing. There's still enough sprinkling of chance with the crit percentages to give you that occasional exciting dice roll, but it feels much more like a straight test of my tactical abilities than just hoping I get lucky. I also adore the movement abilities, which give the whole game a very hyper-mobile playstyle where both you and your opponents can make surprisingly large leaps across sections of the map given smart positioning. The whole thing feels a lot more active than the incredibly defensive hunkered down playstyle I tend to associate with the genre. I greatly appreciated that you could move, shoot and use support abilities in any order as well, which has long been another pet peeve of mine that pops up in many tactics games. While Mario and Rabbids might simplify some aspects of its mechanics, there's still plenty of depth on show here, especially in the likes of the skill trees, and trying to hit those perfect scores on the toughest maps kept me coming back for more long after finishing each area. Just to dip briefly into spoiler territory here for a few seconds, there was a moment during the final battle where Mario and Luigi were trading off shots at the Mega Dragon Bowser fusion as it flew across the stage, and I realised that perhaps what the Mario franchise has been missing all along was sick guns. Number 6. Fire Emblem Heroes. Fire Emblem Heroes doesn't record playtime, but there's a pretty good chance, despite all the lengthy titles which released in 2017, that this is my most played game of the year. I haven't gone a single day without logging into Heroes since it launched, something a few games have managed to do to me for a short period, but never for a full year running. I suspect Heroes was probably intended to appeal primarily to hardcore fans of the Fire Emblem series. You can collect all of your favourite characters from across the games and build your dream teams. Yet, despite being someone who's yet to touch the franchise properly, my only real character knowledge prior coming from their appearances in Smash Bros. And Tokyo Mirage sessions, I still fell completely in love with what Heroes brought to the table. The mechanics are simple enough to work well as a phone game that you can play whilst watching TV, cooking dinner or chatting to friends, yet there's sufficient depth in here to keep things interesting for the long haul. The free-to-play balance feels pretty good as well, which can be a tough thing to hit. Despite not spending money, I've been happy with the rate at which I'm able to summon new heroes and play around with the more advanced mechanics. It's also apparent just how much love and craft is going into the game's development, from the beautiful character portraits which run the gamut of art styles across the series' history, through to the constant updates and events which mean there's always something going on. Unlike some free-to-play titles, I never feel pressured to come back every single day, yet despite that, I still want to, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. Number 5. Splatoon 2. The first Splatoon won my heart the moment I first saw it, so the announcement of a sequel was pretty much reason alone for me to pick up a Switch. Splatoon 2 gave me just about all I could have asked for from a sequel. A more robust and compelling single-player campaign packed with challenging levels and fun boss fights, along with reasons to keep coming back. A cooperative mode filled with unique novel enemy types that made me wish for proper built-in system-level party chat functionality, additional weapons to play around with, new maps to battle it out on, the return of Miiverse-like lobby sketches, tons and tons of stylish new fashion options, and of course, a brand new musical duo to compete for our hearts. I poured hours upon hours into Splatoon 2 at launch and fell in love all over again with its particular brand of competitive shooting, one where you don't always have to be the most accurate shot to win, but where smart movement and map awareness are key to success. You can get really good at taking other players down, but even if you aren't, you can still make helpful contributions to your team by focusing on paint coverage. Splatoon 2 feels like it actually does a great job of encouraging direct engagements with the opposing squids, whilst also offering you more ways than ever to duck out of combat and manoeuvre around the map. Oftentimes there'll be one clear path to get to a certain area, but smart use of wall painting or swim jumps will get you across in ways that can let you catch your foes off guard, or even simply get behind them and cover their spawn in your colours before they realise what's going on. The fashion has also come a long way, and the customization and modification system gives you plenty of ways with which to spend time tweaking your outfit to get that perfect blend of fit and functionality. I had a ton of fun playing through the campaign, and it certainly felt much more like a full experience than the first game, which served it more as a slightly expanded tutorial. I found myself going back and replaying levels with different weapons, which often required me to significantly switch up my approach, and as if that wasn't already a great way to get my head around weapon types I might not otherwise have touched, Salmon Run made for a fantastic opportunity to be pushed out there with a different gun in my hand each time, forcing me to learn my way around every tool in the arsenal. The developer support over time has been great too, with frequent updates, new weapons and maps, and a whole wealth of splatfests. Seeing everyone's event-specific artwork get plastered across the main hub's walls in their team's respective colours during Splatfest weekends is super cool. I was already excited to play more Splatoon on the Switch, but I didn't anticipate that it'd pull me in even harder the second time around. Number 4. Horizon Zero Dawn. I wasn't sure where I'd fall on Horizon. It was gorgeous for sure, but so were Guerrilla's past Killzone titles, and I'd never really clicked with those. However, Horizon clicked for me in just about every way. The narrative managed to weave together its present-day faction warfare with the intrigue of the metal world, and actually did a good job of keeping me guessing and wanting to find out more the whole way through into its final act. I came to love many of the characters I met along Aloy's journey, their dialogue winning me over enough to pull me across the animation's occasional dip into the uncanny valley. The action feels fantastic too. Despite their robotic nature, the animals of Horizon behave perhaps the most naturally I've encountered in a game. The ways in which they graze, peer around while alerted, or flee impacts when startled are majestic. The generous stealth mechanics mean you can lose enemies easily if you can break line of sight, meaning it's possible to adopt guerrilla-style tactics where you duck in and out of the brush, thwacking them with various bombs and luring them into tripwires to bring even the biggest beasts to their knees. I could easily have relied on stealth tactics all game, but thankfully Zero Dawn forced me out of my comfort zone and into head-on encounters by placing me in situations without much cover, or by introducing creatures with an ability to echolocate through the safety of the long grass. As someone who is constantly a hoarder, it was wonderful to be pushed into using my resources left, right and centre. Playing on hard meant that even a couple of big hits could mean the end of me, so I had to make use of every part of my arsenal to survive. Speaking of Aloy's arsenal, I was staggered not only by how many different ideas Horizon managed to find for bow and arrow variants, but that almost every single one felt distinctly useful, and I found myself dipping into every tool in my kit on a regular basis. Had enough of dealing with that aforementioned echolocation? Simply blow off the sensor with a well-placed tear blast arrow and you're free to scamper away into the bushes once more. Managed to break off the casing on a Snapmore's blaze canisters, fire a flaming shot into one, and boom! Horizon's combat pushed me to my limits at times, and it felt immensely satisfying the whole way through. You're given just enough slowdown juice to make the shot, but never so much that it feels like a cheat. The weapon progression even gives you reason to go out on specific hunts, and when you finally extract that Thunderjaw heart for your Tear Blaster, it feels like you really earned your reward. Ultimately, while I was impressed that Guerrilla managed to pull off their ambitious plot setup with a satisfying finale, and I liked a lot of the players who acted that tale out, Aloy in particular, it was the moment-to-moment action which really kept me invested the whole way through my journey. Number 3. Destiny 2. Here's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Had Destiny 2 come out in 2014 in place of the original game, I probably would have liked it slightly less. I still would have had a ton of fun because that core gameplay is still the best first-person shooting and movement in the business, but I would likely have fallen off a lot quicker due to the relative ease of polishing off all the endgame activities. In 2017, however, Destiny 2 was exactly the Destiny I wanted. Gone were those hours of fruitlessly bashing my head against the hardest content, constantly one mistake from death, only to come away yet again with little to show for it but a handful of coins. Destiny 2 gave me more ways to earn the gear I wanted, and made the likes of the Nightfall into much more proactive, exciting missions rather than the tense yet dull long-range shootouts of its predecessor. It also gave me a far more interesting narrative, packed with memorable moments and characters I cared about because they had actual personality, rather than because they spouted some gloriously silly dialogue. I ended up putting around 200 hours into the PlayStation 4 version of Destiny 2 in a matter of weeks, bringing all 3 classes to the max light level and collecting a full suite of exotic weapons along the way. Now, were this 2014, I'd be disappointed that I'd run out of things to do, but in a year packed to the brim with incredible releases, I was so glad to be able to get to that same feeling of grind, loot lust and satisfaction in a much more compressed time frame, and then put it down having seen everything offer until the DLC. Or at least that's what I thought. But Destiny 2 still had its hooks in me, because when the PC release came I found myself going through it all over again, bringing another 3 characters through the full campaign and up towards the endgame. Though I did at least stop a fair way short of grinding up those last few light levels again. I took it much more gradually second time around, spreading it out across several months rather than going all in from the off, but I had just as much fun, in part thanks to the stunning PC port. I came back once more for the Curse of Osiris expansion, and while it was a little lighter on content than I was initially hoping, the story was a ton of fun to play through, and took me to some of the most breathtakingly gorgeous areas the series has seen so far. I didn't really stick around much past that because I've had so many other things to turn my attention to, but I genuinely loved every single moment I spent with Destiny 2, and that makes it a successful sequel in my grimoire. Number 2. NieR Automata. I was always intrigued by the original NieR, a game which never really grabbed wide attention but had a very dedicated fanbase who adored all the things it did well, yet were quick to acknowledge that it was held back by some pretty mediocre gameplay. With Platinum Games taking the reins for Automata, I was instantly more interested in trying it out for myself. However, while the initial footage I saw was certainly stylish, it didn't really catch my attention. Not long after release, however, the buzz around Yoko Taro's latest creation became too much to ignore, and I committed to seeing it through for myself. Once I actually got my hands on the controls, I warmed to its gameplay pretty quickly, coming to appreciate the ways in which it let you tweak your experience with the chip system and its variety of playstyles that it would rapidly switch between. It says a lot for me that not only did I have a ton of fun with the more traditional hack and slash combat, but I actually came to really enjoy the shmup sequences too, something I'm not generally a big fan of. Of course, the gameplay, whilst a lot more fun than I'd initially anticipated, isn't the real draw here. NieR Automata's delicious meat is its narrative, and I was captivated from around the first time I reached the desert a couple of hours in. Having caught up on a summary of the first game's events beforehand, and knowing that Automata also followed the same multiple ending formula, I was expecting something pretty similar, yet I was actually still caught off guard despite my preconceived expectations, something NieR is incredibly good at pulling off. The second playthrough kept me on board with its hacking interface, but it would have felt like it was starting to drag were it not for the outstanding side quests that they keep dotting along your journey. Some of the ones from the first route had been rather fun, but it wasn't until my time as 9S that they begun to truly stand out. There's a musical sting that NieR drops on you after some of the heavier outcomes that is incredibly unsettling, and that will stick with me for a long time to come. I was already very positive on Automata by the time I reached ending B a good 30 odd hours in, but I still didn't quite understand why it was getting as much praise as I'd been seeing. It was fun, and there were some great moments along the way, but I felt a little underwhelmed by where things were wrapping up and wondered what it could possibly do to mix things up from there. Exactly what that something was became clear about halfway through the second run of the credits, and while I won't go into spoilers here, I'll say that everything which went down from that point onwards is perhaps the most incredible ride that a game has taken me on in recent memory. NieR Automata is truly special, the kind of experience which doesn't come around often. There really isn't anything else quite like it. I cannot stop thinking about my time with it, I desperately want to play it again, and it pains me that this arbitrary list format I've built for myself insists on me picking one single game for the top slot. But them's the breaks. It's been one hell of a year for video games, and NieR Automata still shines above most.
It sure is. It sure is.
Number 1, Yakuza 0. It's been a long time coming. I'm not sure when I first became aware of the Yakuza franchise, but it was always one of those things I respected from a distance. I was a little too young to take interest in the PS2 entries, and by the time Yakuza 3 rolled around and the series started to hit its stride, I couldn't bring myself to jump into a story in progress, no matter how ridiculous the occasional clips and gifs I'd see were. It seemed like a series that was destined to stay forever outside my purview, even as glimpses of each consecutive release made it seem even more up my alley. Yakuza 0 was the perfect answer to my prayers. Suddenly there was a new release, complete with all the modern polish of a series that has evolved continuously for over a decade, and it was set at the start of the timeline, before even the events of the original game. The perfect time to jump on the train to Kamurocho and find out exactly what I'd been missing out on for all these years. I didn't hesitate. As it turns out, all those glowing reports of Yakuza's delightful blend of the bizarre and the serious, all those desperate fans pleading with anyone who would listen to give the series a try, they were right all along. Yakuza 0 is a masterpiece. It simultaneously serves as an ideal entry point to the series for newcomers, whilst also adding a wealth of backstory to the series' two most iconic characters for long-term fans to enjoy. I found myself completely wrapped up in the game's central plot, watching these ever-shifting factions warring over a tiny scrap of land known as the Empty Lot. Alliances are forged and broken, characters go through hell and back to protect those they care about, and the whole story builds to a frantic, exciting climax that's left me feeling fulfilled and satisfied. Along the way you encounter a huge cast featuring countless memorable characters, many created solely for this game. There's Kuze, the traditionalist Yakuza, determined and fierce. Awano, the sleazeball lieutenant obsessed with the luxury lifestyle. Shibusawa, the quiet businessman who shoots first because he already knows the answer. Sagawa, the overly friendly boss with a stern edge, ruthless but sympathetic. Nishtani, the wild-eyed, unpredictable joker in the pack. Lee, the bulky bruiser with a heart of gold. Tachibana, mysterious and unassuming yet seemingly bearing all the answers. Oda, the rough-edged thug polished up by his boss. And at the centre of it all, Makoto Makimura, an innocent young woman swept up in a whirlwind of death and destruction without any understanding of why. On top of these, there's plenty of series regulars making an appearance here in their younger days, most notably of course joint protagonists Kiryu and Majima. Yakuza 0 paints an incredible portrait of how both characters came to be the people they are in later entries. You can see the seeds of everything they come to be in the people they meet, the trials and tribulations they face, and even the ways that they fight. Speaking of fighting, the combat systems are sublime, giving both characters three distinct fighting styles representing the component parts of their iconic movesets. Along with the myriad objects scattered around Kamurocho and Sotenbori's neon-lit streets, this gives you a vast array of moves with which to dispatch your foes. The heat actions never stop being a delight to pull off as you slam goons here, there and everywhere in a variety of definitely non-lethal ways. Were Yakuza 0 just its core narrative arc and combat system, it'd probably still be in contention for one of my top slots, but then there's everything else layered on top of that, the knickerbocker glory of side activities that Yakuza is famed for. Everywhere you go there are short sub-stories waiting for you, and astonishingly almost every single one of them is an absolute delight. The sheer consistency of quality across the board is staggering. Whether I was teaching Ayu how to be a better dominatrix, rescuing Iori from the clutches of the Order of Munan Chohepton Ast, bringing together the kids of the Pocket Circuit, or protecting Miracle Johnson as he moonwalked down a street filled with zombies, Yakuza 0's sub-stories had me cracking up with laughter as Kiryu and Majima stepped up to any situation with aplomb. As if that still wasn't enough, there's the likes of karaoke, telephone dating, pool, darts, countless places to eat and drink, a whole suite of classic arcade games to play, and even an erotic video parlour. But wait, there's more. On top of the dozens and dozens of hours of activities and stories that Yakuza 0 kept throwing at me at a breakneck pace, Sega also had the audacity to include 2 full side projects in the form of the Kamurocho Real Estate Royale and the Sunshine Cabaret Club. Kiryu's real estate business was a fun progression that I couldn't tear myself away from until I owned half the city and was raking in billions of yen per hour, but the real star here, the delicious cherry sitting atop that Knickerbocker glory, is the Cabaret Club. Running Sunshine honestly could have been a standalone game and I would have happily paid for it. The amount of depth on offer in this single side project is astonishing, from the ability to completely customise the looks of your best hostesses and engage in conversational minigames to learn more about them whilst improving their skills, through to the actual business of running Club Sunshine and micromanaging your guests. You really get to build bonds with all the girls working for Sunshine, and the little touches such as Majima giving them a sly thumbs up when he serves their table just make my heart explode with joy. Something as small as that is a perfect representation of both the level of careful detail poured into every aspect of this game and the wonderful personality which shines through at every possible moment. That Yakuza 0 manages to pull that charm off through the translation only serves to make it even more impressive. I've already been talking for far too long, and yet it feels like I've barely scratched the surface of what I love about Kiryu and Majima's 80s escapades. But if you're still listening this far in, you've likely noticed a theme popping up in my babbling: the sheer scope and consistency of everything on offer. Yakuza 0 is simply vast, and yet, with just a couple of small if notable exceptions, every single part of it is incredible. It's almost criminal that there's so much to do in a single game, especially when all of it is this much fun. But then what else would you expect from the good crime boys of Yakuza 0? Perhaps the most exciting part of all for me, however, is that 0 is just the beginning. I went on from that to Kiwami, which I also loved, even though it served to show just how much the series has evolved up to now, and I still have 5 more games waiting ahead of me. Yakuza 0 sold me completely. I have to see where things go from here. If you haven't experienced it for yourself, please give it a try. 0 is already frequently on sale, and it was honestly a bargain at full price for what you get. If on the other hand you are already a fan of the franchise, then you've probably already played this, and I suspect you'll be right there with me when I say that Yakuza 0 was, without question, my favourite game of 2017. And that wraps up today's awards and the whole series. Thank you very much for watching, especially if you made it this far. If you did enjoy the series, a like would mean the world to me, and be sure to leave any comments, opinions or queries down below as well. If you want to be kept up to date on future videos, feel free to hit the subscribe button or just pop back whenever you fancy. I've been Ken, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!